Hello everyone and welcome to today's Wild Rift video. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you my top 5 picks for Wild Rift patch 6.1 and to give you a head start in the brand new rank season 17. These 5 picks might not necessarily be the top picks this patch, but these are 5 picks that I've had great success on at the start of this season and I think they have great carry potential to carry in your games. First up in the Baron lane, we have Aatrox. A few patches ago, Aatrox received a nice buff that buffed a lot of his damage, especially during the laning phase. But the real power for Aatrox is when he goes out of the laning phase. Once he gets a few items, his inbuilt healing with his ultimates is absolutely disgusting. There are some games that there are multiple anti-heal items on the enemy team like Mortal Reminder, Morellonomicon, but Aatrox is still able to out-heal all of the anti-heal so he can be a tank for his team, but also do a crazy amount of damage. Speaking of his damage is definitely amplified by things like his sweet spot on his first ability, which could definitely help with his damage. You can combo things like his third ability and also his flash to make sure that you hit the sweet spot on enemy champions. And also things like sudden impact is definitely going to be able to help that as well, with the buff in patch 6.1 being able to deal more true damage and get the movement speed now. On top of the movement speed with his ultimate, he becomes very difficult to lock down and shut down in the late game. In terms of the build with Aatrox, nothing really will surprise you, to be honest. Eclipse is very good as a first item, especially during the laning phase, helps you with traded potential and gives you the extra boost of damage in the mid and the late game. Sundered Sky has great synergy with his passive, with his auto attacks being able to do additional damage. Steric's Gauge is just a great defensive item that gives you a bunch of HP. Serrader's Grudge, you still need an armor pen item for Aatrox to be able to deal with the bruisers and the tanks on the enemy team. And then as your full defensive item, Twin Guard is always the best option when you're building full damage. You get a bunch of armor, a bunch of magic resist, and on top of that, you gain the increased size, increased tenacity, and increased durability. For the runes, Conqueror is still the best rune for Aatrox. I already spoke about his inbuilt healing, but this gets even more with Conqueror, and also the damage on top of that as well definitely helps out Aatrox. The green tree is our main tree. We're going with things like Nullifying Orb, Second Wind for the healing, and Overgrowth or Perseverance depending on your matchup, with Second Wind as that secondary rune to help us gain true damage when we use our dashing with our third ability. Taking a trip through the jungle, instead of the Monkey King being in the Baron lane with this video, I'm going to talk about Wukong in the jungle. Now, his playstyle in the jungle is completely different to Baron lane. His build is completely different, but he still serves the same purpose where he can do a ton of damage. He has great crowd control and survivability. Now, Riot definitely tried to shift Wukong more into the Baron lane last year with nerfs to his jungle clear in general and more buffs to his first ability against enemy champions, but his jungle clear speed is still decent. He still packs a punch when it comes to team fights as well and skirmishes with his ultimates. And with this type of build, we're going for a more lethality one-shot build, so you can be stealth with your second ability, jump into team fights, and one-shot enemy carries. This definitely does help with a game like Wild Rift where vision is not really key. You don't really see a lot of wards being placed around the map. There's not as much wards available to teams compared to PC League of Legends. So what you could do with Wukong is hide in a bush, wait for enemy champions to come towards you, and then use your items, use your burst damage with things like First Strike and be more of a carry rather than a bruiser in the Baron lane. Now, for that burst damage build, we're going for items like Trinity Force in the jungle, still one of the best items in the game right now, just gives you all the stats you really need. Ghost Blade still does a bunch in terms of damage and also gives Wukong a bit of movement speed. We have the armor penetration item in there as well and a little bit of anti-heal with Mortal Reminder. Edge of Night is to stop any crowd control coming our way when we're dashing in onto the backline, since we will be focused quite a lot. And if that doesn't help, then Guardian Angel is there as a backup as well, just to resurrect us from any lethal damage we might be taking. And as for the runes, First Strike, the main rune for this playstyle for Wukong, where you want to, as I mentioned, go invisible, use your third ability to jump onto the backline, be the one that deals the first damage, so you proc First Strike, and that true damage, the extra true damage that you're able to deal with First Strike with your first ability and your ultimate, has incredible potential to one-shot enemy carries, and sometimes doesn't even allow them to blink before they get completely one-shot. And then on top of that, you have things like Gathering Storm for the scaling AD damage in the mid and late game, Giant Slayer if you're struggling to deal damage against tanks, Legend Alacrity for the attack speed, and of course, Sudden Impact on top of that as well to deal even more true damage when we're using things like our second ability or even our third ability. For the mid lane, I was going to pick Rise, but to be honest, he just gets banned way too often. And it's very difficult to get your hands on this champion because everyone understands how strong he is right now in the current meta and in his current game state. So instead, we're going to be talking about one of the best users for the new item Malignance, which is Swain. Now, at first, I wasn't really too sure about Malignant Swain because I wasn't too sure how his interaction would work. Would it be every single tick of damage with damage over time? Would it just be at the start and at the end of his ultimate? But actually, it's going to be once every 3 seconds with his ultimate. So now Swain is all about timing. Every 3 seconds that you count in your head, you want to use your other abilities like your second ability and your third ability to slow enemy champions and root them underneath the Malignance pool, so then your other abilities can do more damage since the Malignance is going to be reduced their mag resist, but also Malignance itself is also going to be dealing more damage. And this also helps with runes like Phase Rush, which is going to allow you to stick to enemy champions, and also Ghost. So that means that you can stay with enemy champions inside your ultimate, and it's going to be very difficult for enemy champions to be able to escape. He also has inbuilt health scaling in his kit, so it allows him to scale incredibly well into the mid and the late games. So not only are you going to be dealing a lot of damage with this build, with Malignance, you're also going to be taking damage, allowing you to be a frontline for your team as well. And also his laning phase is not that bad either. You know, with the past few patches, Swain has been receiving some buffs to his damages, so it allows him to trade a lot better now during the laning phase. And Phase Rush definitely helps that as well, since it works on both procs on the third ability. So when you hit the third ability and when you pull someone back, that will count as 2 out of 3 stacks towards Phase Rush. So all you need to do is auto attack afterwards or use your first ability, and then you can easily kite away and walk away from any damage you might take. Now, talking about the build, we already spoke about Malignance, but we still want to go items like Rod of Ages. I think the stats overall are just way too good for Swain. The HP for allowing him to be a tank, the extra mana to help him use abilities more often during fights, and also, of course, the ability power to allow him to deal more damage. I like Malignance as a second item. You can delay this to a third item if you want to, but Death Cap is, of course, still very strong to give you a crazy amount of damage. Rift Maker just allows you to gain Omnivamp and true damage, so you have a little bit more healing in your kit. And as your defensive item, Twin Guard is still going to be the best option. Since you deal damage over time, it's very easy to stack Twin Guard, even if you hit your second ability at range, which means you can even fully stack Twin Guard before you get into a team fight or before you use your ultimate, making you completely unkillable. Phase Rush is our main rune choice. I already mentioned the extra movement speed is very nice, but also the extra ability haste, so you can use your abilities more often. I prefer the green tree just to give you a bit more survivability during the laning phase and also in later game fights. Things like Nullifying Orb is very good, Bone Plating, and also Overgrowth, which actually stacks on top of his passive as well. But if you need Perseverance, maybe for the extra resistances when you get crowd control, that can also be very good. And then Transcendence, even though this rune did receive a bit of a quote-unquote nerf, it's still very, very strong and still very good on a champion like Swain, which loves ability haste to use his abilities more often. My pick for the dual lane and the Marksman pick this patch is Corki again. I'm very surprised this champion did not receive a single nerf in terms of items, just stats in general. Corki has been dominating the Rift ever since his rework, and for some reason Riot decided to buff the champion even after the rework as well. Now we got things like Manamune being buffed now as well, so it stacks much quicker. Trinity Force still works incredibly well, but now we can go for a more crit damage build after that, making sure that your auto attacks also deal a lot of damage. This champion works incredibly well. Now, most of the time, you do want to play Corki with a tank support. This allows him to hit his abilities much easier because of the crowd control from the tank supports. But since this champion is just so strong right now, even from his auto attacks, you could honestly play Corki with enchanters, with Lulu potentially, Yumi, Seraphine, Sona, any sort of enchanters which can keep Corki alive. It's just absolutely insane because he gets already so much auto attack damage and damage in general. The only downside to Corki is that he has very low attack range, so he can struggle against maybe assassins and bruisers that might be able to jump on top of him. But if you have an enchanter by your side, if you have a tank by your side that can help pill Corki, he can sit back, use his abilities, and do a crazy amount of damage. Now, this might be a hot take, but I honestly think that Corki's new package or his new passive is actually a lot better. The empowered ultimate rockets 4 times in a row during a team fight does a crazy amount of damage. Now, his package before was obviously very impactful, but to be honest, it was very difficult for the timing, you know, going back to base, picking up the package and then making sure you get to a team fight in time. And even sometimes you would use your enhanced Valkyrie to go forward, to go across a team fight, but then you might get caught on the other side of the map. I just like the burst damage and the damage potential with the 4 increased rocket damage with your ultimate. So it might be a hot take, but I think overall his package is also better, which again helps his damage. Now, speaking quickly of the build, as I mentioned, Manamune is now the best option for Corki. Manamune now stacks much quicker into the mid game. You can now stack this about 2 minutes quicker than before, since the buff that happened a few patches ago. Trinity Force is still going to synergize very well with Corki because of things like the Sheen passive and the stats overall. And then after that, you just want to go for full crit. Infinity Edge is a great item to amplify your damage and give you crazy crit potential. Mortal Reminder is now very strong on Corki since you're dealing a lot more AD damage with your auto attacks and your abilities. And then Magnetic Blaster, I really like this item on Corki. I mentioned about him struggling with attack range, which Magnetic Blaster can help with. Getting that extra attack range every so often so he can sit back, use his abilities, and use your auto attacks to do a crazy amount of damage. For the runes, Conqueror is still very good since your abilities are going to be potentially dealing, you know, damage over time with the third ability. Your rockets also have a very low cooldown that you're still going to be auto attacking in between your abilities, so it's going to allow you to get more Omnivamp and more damage. Brutal for the extra auto attack damage is also very strong. Giant Slayer in case you're struggling against any tanks or bruisers. And Legend Bloodline in your kit to get even more Omnivamp, with a defensive rune like Bone Plating as your secondary option, just in case you do get dove on by any bruisers or assassins. Bone Plating is going to be able to save your life. Lastly, in the support role, I've gone for one of the strongest enchanters right now in the current meta, which, no, it's not Lulu, no, it's not Yumi. These champions are not as broken as this champion, which is Seraphine. Now, one of the main reasons why Seraphine and even Sona are very strong at the moment is because of the buff to Boots of Lucidity, which Boost of Lucidity before was never really built because you just gain health and ability haste, and that was basically it. But now you have the inbuilt base and mana regeneration on top of the health, on top of the ability haste that you get. This is now one of the strongest boot choices and maybe strongest items for enchanter supports right now. Enchanter supports love ability haste so they can use their healing and shielding more often, but they struggled with mana when using the Boots of Lucidity. But now you have inbuilt mana regeneration. You're never going to struggle with mana again. And this makes supports like Sona, like Seraphine, that have AoE healing and shielding every so often much more powerful. On top of that, the support items now getting healing and shielding percentage instead of more ability power is a little bit weaker in the early game, but honestly, once you get 3 or 4 items and all this healing and shielding percentage gets amplified and just keeps stacking on top of each other, it becomes absolutely disgusting. Like, you can just use your empowered second ability with Seraphine, your entire team gets like a 300-400 shield for free, and that's only going to be on like a 3 second cooldown every so often. So you keep healing, you keep shielding your team and keeping them alive. But not only that, I mentioned how enchanter supports in general are a lot more weaker in solo queue because you can't rely too much on your team. I like the AoE versions with Seraphine and Sona because in lower elos especially, there's a lot more team fights, there's a lot more grouping, which these are going to help you especially. But also Seraphine has probably one of the most impactful ultimates in the game as well, which a lot of people underrate. Being able to sit back, protect your carries, but also extend the range of the ultimate when you're hitting allies, so you can charm the entire enemy team. On top of that, her damage is also still very strong with this build, with her third ability and also her first ability, and the crowd control is also massive as well. The ultimate for the charm, as I just mentioned, the root on top of that as well. Everything in general with Seraphine just worked hand in hand together to make her one of the strongest support picks this patch. Now, as we're running through the build, you're going to see that there's a lot of ability haste and a lot of support items. I like Ancient Coin as an option since you gain the extra ability haste. Boost of Lucidity, as I mentioned already, is a great option. We go for Harmonic Echo, which is going to give us extra healing every so often. On top of that, with Redemption and Staff of Foam Water and Ardent Sensor, again, just two very good support items, which not only give you more healing and shielding percentage, but also buffs your team at the same time. Glacial Augment actually has a very broken interaction right now with Seraphine, where if you auto attack and slow an enemy champion, you don't need to use the empowered version of your third ability. You can just use the single cast and you're going to be able to root enemy champions. And this actually helps Seraphine a lot in terms of pick potential. You can walk up in lane, auto attack with Glacial Augment, then use the single part of your third ability. And then when they try and trade back, you use the empowered version of your second ability instead to make sure that your AD carry and yourself gain extra shielding, and you will win every single trade during the laning phase. On top of that, Font of Life is going to help with extra healing as well when you're using your abilities in lane and in team fights. Bone Plating for extra survivability, and Revitalize to get more healing and shielding power on top of our support items. And another crazy interaction is Ingenious Hunter. This gives you item ability haste, which actually is going to increase the time, or decrease the time I should say, that Harmonic Echo stacks. This allows Harmonic Echo to stack much quicker, which means you can heal more often in fights. It also decreases the time of Redemption as well, and also Locket of the Iron Solari, which is going to be your enchantment option. So these items, reducing the cooldown of them, giving again more healing and shielding into the kit. You could probably see where I'm coming from, why this champion is so broken right now. And you can even try this same sort of build with someone like Sona, because Boost Lucidity now gives base mana regeneration. And that's going to do it for my top 5 picks for the new rank season 17. Hopefully the start of the new season is going well for everyone. If there's a champion that I maybe missed that you've been having a lot of success on, let me know down in the comments. And of course, if you have any questions, if you want to know any more information about these champions and maybe the meta at the moment, again, leave your comments down below. I always read and reply to every single comment. Until next time, stay safe, enjoy the rank climb, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.